And I just want to first say thank you so much for taking the time to um, for this interview. We're really, really grateful for your time and also for your willingness to be included in our Latinx Legacy and Oral History project. It means a lot, especially considering your contribution to the UFW and just the amazing history that you have to share. Um, but speaking of that, I guess we can jump in and get started.
Okay.
Um, yeah, if that's okay with you. I guess
Yeah, that's fine.
I would love to hear um first and foremost, just I guess your early upbringing in the UFW and your history in brief. What kind of events in your life led you to do the political and health work that you do today,
Okay.
especially in health. I do remember you mentioning in other interviews and some stuff I found online that I think at 7 years old, you got involved in a strike that your mother was a part of against the
Yes.
DiGiorno Food
I'm
Corporation.
so okay. So I'm born and raised in Delano, California, and my family, all of my family, were plank members of the UFW. My uncle
Right.
Richard Chavez designed the Union flag and designed the 40 acres. The center, the Union hiring hall, and the clinic, the first clinic that we had there, and the gas station. So the very first doctor that I ever remember going to was through the union. We had a trailer and there were doctors and nurses that would come and volunteer their time. So my mother was a striker and so were my aunts. They worked in the grapes in the fields. And my mother worked in the cuadrilla with Helen Chavez, Caesar's wife. And so, we were all a community there in Delano. And so I grew up in the Union, going to the picket lines and then going with my mother on the buses to Los Angeles when we were supporting like Robert Kennedy when he ran for president and other candidates that were running, the first Latino candidates, because Caesar knew that it was important that we were going to have to get Latinos elected in order to change anything in Sacramento, to change any laws. So farm workers that were on strike we would first go on the buses to LA to do the Safeway boycott. And then as we got involved in politics and civic engagement, we would go and talk to, Latinos about getting registered to vote and how important their vote was so that we could really make changes. And that us in the Central Valley, it was important that we can get Latinos elected. And as the union grew and as people became more conscientious through the education of the union and how we needed to participate, some of the hijos de los campesinos went to college, and then those became our first, like Richard Polanco and some of the others, became our first elected officials. So I grew up, like I said, and we had an alternative after school program called the Huelga School, which was manned by volunteers because our parents were at the strike all day. So they would come and pick us up after school and would help us with our schoolwork. So my whole education, I could say, came from the union. So no doubt I did become a union labor organizer, which I've been organizing for 30 plus years. I worked for the National AFL-CIO out of Washington, D.C. And so I worked with many different unions, but I also worked with the United Farm Workers and in Monterey with the hotel restaurant workers. And we organized a Selmar Conference Center. And then also in Arizona, 3,500 America West airline workers. So we would train um, the the stewards or the leaders in the unions, on how to talk to their coworkers and, empower them
Mhm.
so they could build their union and having a bargaining agreement where you could have fair wages, a safe working conditions, a voice on the job, a grievance procedure, health insurance for their families. So, I had learned all of that. People go to school in political science to learn this, but I had learned it by living it and recognizing the difference that it made in our community and in our families, from Coachella to Salinas. And one of my coworkers that I recruited, she had gone to college, but her parents were lechugueros from Salinas. So when I was working in Monterey, that's when I met her. And we also worked together with the AFL-CIO. And many of my team members were hijos de campesinos, like Rigo Valdez. Many of them are leaders now in the unions. They're directors. And Rigo came from Coachella, and his parents were farm workers there. His mother worked in the grapes there. So
Mhm.
that's basically my upbringing. And, I really got to see and learn the value of organizing also a comprehensive campaign where you build
Right.
committees, support from outside and direct action, political action, taking your workers to speak in Sacramento or to speak wherever, to get allies and support. And the sacrifices that we were there when Caesar was fasting on the mini fast he had there at the 40 acres, and we'd sleep in tents. It was Campo Justicia. That was the original Campo Justicia. And every night we had candlelight vigils, and we would sing our songs in order to uplift the spirits of the workers. So that was like firsthand, front row seats of learning about the union and the power
Right.
of the union. And it had to be more power together, right? And not
Hmm.
just the workers, but others. Like when Caesar and Dolores would speak at universities, they would tell people, if you want to make a difference, come to Delano. We need you. And there was always something they could do. For instance, some of those that couldn't speak Spanish, so they couldn't organize, but they could work with us, with the kids. And that made a big difference. Like I've never gone to college, but I've worked on, like I said, many political campaigns. Um, Hillary Clinton's campaign. I was 14 when I had my very first precinct, which was Esteban
Wow.
Torres when he ran for Congress, and he became a congressman and an ambassador. And he actually recently passed away not too long ago, but he made a big difference in the Los Angeles area where he represented. My uncle worked for him in Telacu and Pico Rivera in Los Angeles area.
Hmm. That's
So,
amazing.
so I had firsthand knowledge of meeting and knowing these people too, and knowing like we can't have empty promises, and that they only had a warranty of 2 years because if they didn't do the job for assembly or senate, we could always vote them out, right?
Right. No, yeah. I guess were there any moments in these earlier periods that had like an impression on you in terms of healthcare, like and access to healthcare? I mean, what did you see, I guess, in these campaigns? Like what were people fighting for, particularly in terms of healthcare?
Well, for instance, like before we had the little, even just the clinic, the trailers, I had
Hmm.
never gone to a doctor, and I have like
Right.
asthma, and I would always get sick. Like every year, I was going to get sick, but it was always home remedies. And so it was so important to have health care because otherwise our parents could not afford to take us to the doctor and pay the water bill and the light bill and the rent and so forth.
Hmm.
It was it was either survive or you just couldn't afford it. That's how
Right.
many people. Also, what I saw and what I've learned and why I feel it's critical and important that I stay involved and active. This is my 11th year on being of
Hmm.
the board of Omni Family Health, and we're in Kern County, Tulare County, Kings County, and Fresno County, and we're in most of the small communities where we're not competing with anybody, and we're farm workers or people of lower income that don't have Medicare, Medi-Cal, or they don't qualify for whatever reasons. They can get quality health care, at a reasonable price, because then we could do preventative care, like you
Hmm.
can track diabetes early, and if they have heart failure or any of those kidney failure, because from so many years of working in the fields with the pesticides, they get sick, or also not being able to use the restroom often because they're all the way at the end of the surco, like the row of the crop that they're working, and the restrooms are per se were way on the other side. They're not going to leave just to go there. So many times workers are, they're not able to meet their physical needs, and so their kidneys give out, from all those years of abuse, really. And so I
Hmm.
realized that preventative care was so important, and especially in having a bargaining agreement, a union contract, which is what a lot of times the workers will care more about their health care than even the wage increase, because they
Hmm.
can cover their children and themselves. If they get sick, who's going to support the family, you know?
Hmm.
And my mother died at a very young age, at the age of 40. She was sick at 35, and it was from a brain disease. But we'd had, she was a poor farm worker. We didn't have the resources to go, or, the vehicle even to go to like UCLA or UCSF or some other place where she could probably get help. So,
Hmm.
she died at 40 years old. And those last 5 years at 35, that's a very young age. I'm
Yeah.
66 now, and I'll be 67 soon. And
Hmm.
I'm recently been going through cancer, but yet I have health care. So I was
Hmm.
able to get diagnosed early. Well, I found it. And as soon as I did, we did the testing and everything. And I've been getting treated at City of Hope, where it's like the best care you can get, one of the
Hmm.
best care. So
It's
making sure
amazing.
you're treated on time and, having that health
Hmm.
care available. And in our clinics, we do provide dental, mental health, because we know that's so important.
Right.
And we have our pharmacies, and we also do deliveries, because we know that there are elders that can't get out, or they don't have anybody to pick up their medicines for them. So we deliver to them. Like, I actually got COVID and I live alone. So I was lucky that they delivered the medication to me, and we were able to do telemedicine, do
Right.
a video call. And, that was so important, because I would not have gotten the medication in time.
Hmm.
So, I feel like it's very valuable to be on the board, and I represent Delano, but I also represent the farm worker community. So, like, I'm able to give input, like when workers are working long hours. So then maybe they're not going to go to the doctor. So maybe we can stay open on a Saturday,
Right.
and, to be able to meet the needs of farm workers, or when the work slows down, when they're able to go during the day, critical information like that, that's important.
Yeah. I guess I'm curious about that because you mentioned how they were delivering medicine. I'm curious how Omni Family Health stays aware and stays sensitive to the needs of the community members and of different farm workers. Because I think that's a really good program to have, delivering medicine. Um, how how do you guys keep sensitive to that? Do you guys question people? Do you interview people? How do you keep up to
Well,
like how do you keep up with that?
yeah. Hold on. Just let me turn this off, because somebody's
That's
trying to
okay.
call me. Hey, I'm on a call right now, but I'll call you back. Okay. Um, yes, we have cards in all of our facilities where they can give input. The patients can give input, but also that's why they have people like us, that I'm a user of the clinic myself.
Right.
So, like, we had one service, a call-in system that really wasn't working, and stuff. So I was able to also give input, because I use it myself. And so then we found something that worked better. We're always constantly trying to stay. We're one of the best practice clinics, and we've also gotten awards for the work that we do, because we try to stay on top of it, and we spirit innovative. And our executive management team is really, they're always looking for state of the art, just like realizing that we needed to have a pharmacy in the clinic, because this way people can pick up their medication on the same day that they went for their doctor appointment, instead of having to come back, or having to send somebody to pick it up for them. So that and the delivery we find are very critical. It's
Yeah,
crucial to people getting what they need.
that's amazing. And I guess if you're comfortable, I would like to ask about your mother and I guess the problems that she was having. Because I know that is that something that you would consider has informed your experience in going into healthcare?
I think that was one of them. Not only that, I mean, good thing that I feel like I had that experience young for a purpose, because my sister was 47 and she got the same disease. It's called leukoencephalopathy. It's a
Hmm.
leukodystrophy, vanishing white matter of the brain. And
Hmm.
my sister got it, and she had been out of work. She works for Head Start. She's a teacher, and she was then working family care, family advocate. Anyway, she had been out of work 6 months and going to the doctor, and they were telling her that she might have Parkinson's, or
Hmm.
um, I forgot what the other thing was, but they hadn't done any tests. And when I found out, I happened to be precinct walking, because I love precinct walking. So I
Hmm.
always do my hometown, because I know the neighbors, or this way I keep up with who's still there, who's not, and
Right.
their children are now in the home or whatever. And they will usually wait for me. Oh, estaba esperando para que me digas de este bill. They want to know. And
Yeah.
they trust me. I have the trust of my community. like I said, I was gone for many years because of my organizing, but I always
Hmm.
came back for family, engagements and things like that. And so I always have stayed in touch with my community. And
Right.
and my family is big there, and I have a large family in town. So they're compadres, compadres, the neighbors and so forth. So, anyways, my sister had told me that one of our younger sister was sick and had been out of work for 6 months. And I'm like, well, what's wrong with her? And that's what she told me. Well, they said she might have Parkinson's, or she might have, I don't know what. And so right away I went over and I said, what's going on? And she was off, she said, on a stress, off on stress or something, because she thought she was getting headaches and she felt unbalanced and dizzy and stuff. And I said, well, I asked her what the doctor told her, and that's what she told me. I said, well, what tests have they done? And she said none. And I'm like, what? And she said she was going to a specialist. So I got my mother's autopsy. And then I had her make an appointment with the doctor, and I went with her. And I told her, how can you tell my sister, that she has this illness when you haven't done any tests? What tests have you done to be able to diagnose this? And then she said, oh, I haven't, because they're very expensive. And that was the wrong thing to
Well,
say. And I said,
yeah.
what? What? I said, my sister's a professional and she has health care, and her husband is a correctional officer and he has health care. So she has 100% crossover. I said, this disease that she could have is I said, is very aggressive and you could be liable. When I said
Yeah.
that, she got all, and I told her, if it's beyond your scope, why haven't you sent her somewhere? And I said, there's no such thing as a test are too expensive. That's what they're there for, because she
Yeah.
hadn't done a CT scan or brain scan or anything. So then, and I showed her my mother's autopsy, and it said that it could be genetic and hereditary, right? So
Hmm.
then we ended up going to Stanford, but by at that time it took like 4 months to get the results back. But so during that time, it was an election year and I was running the Central Labor Council. But every night I would stay up late and do research, and I would listen to doctors giving lectures, about breakthroughs and so forth. So I found out about clinical bone marrow transplants. So
Hmm.
when the doctor came back, um, when she came back with the results the day that we went to Stanford, she let us know that it was confirmed that my sister had the same thing my mother had, and she could have died within 5 years. She's already 7 years and
Well,
living
yeah.
successfully, and so then she's thriving. So then, when the doctor came, she let us cry and hug or whatever. Then she came back in, and I said, "Okay." I said, "So now, Plan B." I said, "I hear that there's clinical bone marrow transplants. Where do they do them, or where do we have to go? We'll do anything to save our sister's life." And then she
Hmm.
told me that at that time they were only doing it in Minnesota, and then someplace else that was really far. And I said, "That's okay." So went back and got the information and said, "You call on your end, and then I'll call on my end." And I said, "Okay." So we ended up going there. And the good thing is, for an evaluation, is that my sister was still young and she was still healthy. Like, the disease had not advanced yet, to such a state. So, but just within those 4 months that we had waited for the test to come back, she went from walking unbalanced to being in a wheelchair.
Well, that's
And
amazing.
so what you lose, you can never get back.
Yeah.
But her brain is still there, and she can still talk and use her hands, because our mother just didn't have any capacity to use any of those facilities. She was just on an NG tube and in the bed basically. So, anyways, we went, and they said she was a great candidate. She was only the third one, and the second candidate didn't make it. We know, because later we've gone to two conferences on this illness, and there's a group called Sisters Hope, and there are three sisters, and two of the sisters have had this illness and other people in the family. So they started this nonprofit. And so we've gone to Irvine for these conferences. And so one of our sisters was the bone marrow donor. And like I said, so she had the bone marrow transplant, and she's been 7 years, and she's thriving. The only thing is she's in the wheelchair, but there's a lot of people in a wheelchair. So it can't cure the disease, but it'll stop it from progressing. It slows it down from progressing. And so yeah, I think that having been in that situation of not having health care, and knowing that there's other families like that their family die without any hope because they don't have health care and they don't have the financial means, to pay for
Right.
what they, for health care, for
Hmm.
medical treatment. So,
Yeah. And that must have been a really frustrating experience to have as well. I mean, one thing we always hear about the healthcare system is that a lot of it is made frustrating on purpose so that people will just, stop trying. And I guess
mhm.
I'm curious if all of your experiences throughout your life and being involved in, these political campaigns, if that empowerment kind of translated into you crying, crying for your
Yes.
sister.
Yes, it
Yeah.
did. It did. Even like I said, when we were building a new clinic, we had found out there was plume below it, and the city knew about
Right.
it and didn't tell us. But
Hmm.
because I'm so connected to so many of my nonprofits, like the person who was the assistant director. He used to be my organizing director at the UFW. And he told me,
Hmm.
hey, did you know? He knew I was on the board. He said, did you know that there's plume, blah, 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 by there? I said, no. So right away, I told our CEO. So we looked into it and we did an EIR because there had been not one had not been done. And so then, we did all the mitigation and means necessary. It was by us, but not under our building. But anyways, it took us 10 years. But so what we did is we worked to get some of the people off the council and elect two people that we knew would work with us because those people would rather keep it quiet, as their dirty little secret. They want to sell the property and they don't want people
Well,
to know.
yeah.
So we got people elected and then we were able to work together with the state. And that's where we built residents for a clean Delano and
Hmm.
RCD. And so I was on the board of that. And also, so after that, after we got that taken care of, we were having them do a study of the people who still live in the area where the plume is at to see
Hmm.
have they been affected. So that's in the process right now.
Oh,
And,
well.
so yes, all of those experiences have empowered me to not give up and to continue and to know that we just need to get more people involved and spread the
Mhm.
word because from what my knowledge from knowing our community, I had found out that there's been quite a few people who have passed away from cancer that actually worked at a location that was kind of directly above where the plume was, you know.
Wow. And
So
tell me more about that. I know the Delano Gardens and CERA got involved in this campaign as well,
yeah, our
right?
uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Yeah. So tell me more about that. What are plums? And then what was that process in getting rid of those leaders who
The
didn't care about their
CRPE
community?
Center for Race, Poverty, the Environment. That's
Hmm.
CRPE, the Center for Race, Poverty, and the Environment. So I'm a part of the Guardians. That's it. I'm a
Hmm.
part of the Guardians, and yeah, so that's why I said like they got involved because they're, they do a lot of work with the environment. And like I said, Lupe Martinez and I, we have a long history in the union, like, you know, from
Right.
many, many years, right? And that's the thing. I know so many people, union leaders and other people in community-based organizations who did different kind of work. But since that was in Delano and that's where they live, and then I
Hmm.
was on the board, so we started going to the city council meetings. And like I said, we ended up getting Veronica Vasquez elected and Brian, all of a sudden I can't think of the last name, Brian
Is it Brian Osorio?
Solorio. Brian
Oh,
Solorio.
yeah.
Not Brian Solorio, that's Sal Solorio. Brian, oh my God, all of a sudden I
Brian
can't think of
Osorio,
this.
no?
Osorio, yes, Osorio,
Yes.
Brian Osorio elected. And they were aware of the CRPE and Veronica was raised in the union as well with her grandparents and her family.
Hmm.
And so once we got them involved, that's how we were able to build the coalition with the state and with the city and able to make those changes. And so they build these big machines. And I don't know if I sent you one of the pictures. We're in front of the mural with Larry Itliong, the mural
Hmm.
back there. And we have a picture of like one of the big machines. So we have meetings with them and I'm on that board. And we, about once a month, we had started doing them like every 4 months. And but so this way we know if the machines are working and what the capacity, what's going on. So we keep in touch that way. And
This is a
yeah,
pretty recent campaign then, right? Because Brian Osorio
yes,
hasn't been in office for
right.
I want to say more than a decade.
Well, this is yeah, this was the first time he was in office. He's in again
Right.
now, but it was the
Yeah.
first time he was in office. Correct.
Yeah. Wow. That's
So
amazing.
yeah, it took us 10 years. It took us 10 years of fighting for it before we were finally able to get what we needed, because the other people that were on the council, they were not, working with us,
What
right?
was
But
that like?
also,
Like,
I think it also helped that because Omni was, they had made business with Omni and sold that property. So Omni, had a big investment too. So I think it also helped that, there was more people than just us pushing,
right.
right?
Yeah, there was some business interests in there as well.
Yes.
Um, I guess I'm curious, like, what was that resistance like? Did they just brush you off? Or,
Yeah, yeah, they did. They did. Well, for instance, like you saw the letter in 2028, they're going to make the bridge and all the surrounding area from one end to the other ADA compatible.
right.
Because I went to the council to let them know, because one of our community neighbors had
Mm,
got murdered by a diesel truck turning the corner and ran over him. He was trying to get up on it on his little mobility scooter, but it's not ADA compliant, so he couldn't get
mm-hmm.
up soon enough. And but that was in 2011, and nothing ever happened about it. And so I went to go and tell them that. And I used to walk across that bridge every day when my mother was in the hospital, very
Hmm.
often. And this was when I was like 17, 18, like that. And then when I was a young mother, like I would push the stroller or have the baby on the backpack. I was like
Right,
22, and I would see like in some areas it's still dirt there. And
right.
when I would go to Delano, because I was living in Bakersfield, I would get angry. I would get angry every time I seen it, because I'm like, my daughter's going to be 45, and it was a few years before that, 40 something years, and it still looks the same. Like, so I went to complain about it, and I told them, somebody was murdered there because that bridge is non ADA compliant. Because I had
Hmm.
already looked at, okay. So then they just brushed me off and said, "Oh, well, that's not our jurisdiction." And that's it. That
Wow.
was their answer. So I said,
Yeah,
"All right." But I've worked for an Assembly Member Hernandez, and I ran his campaign. He's in Baldwin Park and the East San Gabriel Valley. So,
right,
I know about the different agencies, right? So I just
right,
looked up, and it was the Caltrans who's in charge of that. So I looked up their website, and it said, like, oh yeah, because they wanted to do like the city had talked about wanting to do a thing where people could walk and healthy. And I go, well, before people can walk to be healthy, they have to have a safe place to walk. I said,
right.
our patients can't even get to our clinic safely because that was during COVID and the trees were overgrown. But still, somebody had the contract to maintain that, right? But they were
Hmm.
not doing their job. So,
Hmm.
so that was my first complaint to the state. I took pictures and I said exactly where it was, and I said why I was making this complaint, that our patients aren't able to get to the clinic and so forth. So that they sent me a response right away, and and every time when I would go to Delaney, I always look to make sure that it's being upkept. And so then the second complaint is I went and I took pictures all the way around the bridge, and the streets, and then I showed where even to cross, like if you're in a wheelchair or with the walker or you have a stroller, it's unsafe to go across where people get on the freeway, because there was like a what do you call it? The sidewalk is high, the lip or something.
Right.
This,
Yeah.
anyways, it wasn't like ADA compliant. It was high.
Right.
So by the time you can get that over, I mean, it's just. And then if you're on, some people don't have someone to push them. They're by themselves in their wheelchair. How can they do that? So
Hmm.
anyways, so I took all the pictures, and then I wrote down, where it was and the intersections and why and so forth. And I showed the dirt, and I said, after so many years, it's still like this. And then I told them about the person in 2011 who passed away. So then it took a little longer. I guess they had to send somebody out to check it out. And because they said,
Hmm.
after our investigation, we have found your complaint to be valid, and we will, it would be $5.5 million that we will be investing to make it ADA compliant in 2028. And the
Hmm.
reason it was going to take that long is because they had to do the they had to get right of ways and stuff, so that when they shut it down, and they have a lot of things that they had
Right.
to, their engineers, the plans and all that stuff. So they
Hmm.
said, is this, if you agree, do you agree with this? And I said, yes, because it's better than not doing anything at all, right?
Right. That makes
It's been
sense.
this way all these years. And then so
Hmm.
after I got the response from them, I went back to the city, And then I read the response and I said, by the way, I just want to tell you, it may not be your jurisdiction to do the work, but it is in your jurisdiction to represent our community. What you should have said to me was, thank you for your concern. I will have our staff call a state on Monday or something, or
Right.
I will have my staff make a call to the state, right? That's your
Hmm.
job, is to
That
look
is their
out for this
job.
community.
Hmm.
That's why you're elected. And
Yeah.
so, anyways, but so
No, it's important.
they know that I don't take no for an answer very easily.
And which state agency was this?
It was
Did you Caltrans, right?
Caltrans.
Hmm.
So
And do you think,
anybody can do it. You don't have to be an
yeah?
elected official. You just have to gather your information, take pictures, be specific, and address the issue,
Hmm.
you
That's
know.
amazing. Yeah. And I know, so jumping off of that, I'm curious because you've also done work in Porterville, right? I remember there was that whole,
Yeah,
oh my
with the
God, I even
water.
remember this because I'm from the area, so I even remember this when the what was it, the corporation's drill was still digging and then the community well
Yeah,
was not.
Big Ag was drilling deeper and deeper and they had water, but the community on the
Yeah.
east side didn't. Yeah, so
Yeah.
I know people that are from there, and so what they asked me, "Hey, can you help us?" And I said, "Okay." So I was going door to door because, like if somebody comes with the clipboard that, doesn't look like they belong in their neighborhood, they're not going to open the door. But I
Yeah.
would knock on their door. They would, "Oh, no quieres un café, no quieres un jugo, un agua," or, but they
Yeah.
would show me and they would say, "Mira, tengo que ir a donde vive mi hermano a traer agua." And,
Hmm.
and then the Office of Emergency Services was I think in Visalia. I mean, they can barely get a ride to work, and they have to pay el raitero. They don't have a car to go to Visalia. They should have
Right.
had an office there, on ground
Hmm.
zero where the issues were. So
Yeah.
they did put like that thing where they can go take showers, remember? And then they had the
Right.
big tanques by I think they were by the fire department. I don't remember where they had them now all of a sudden, but they had some big tanks where people can go fill up their things with water. And then eventually they put the tanks in front of the homes. So my job, what I did was some news people wanted to talk to, families that were impacted. So I did take them, like if you Google my name and
Hmm.
maybe say water, it might come up. But like I said, we're not fighting with ag because we know we all need food, but we need water and we need workers. So, it's important that our families' needs are addressed as well, because I didn't want
Hmm.
to get into that. But yeah. And so, yeah, the families, oh, so I would go and find out how many people lived in the home and put the card in front because the state was doing a drive-through with
Hmm.
other people also, and to see, how many people were impacted by that.
Hmm.
And the thing was, then their electric bills were coming outrageous because their pumps were going and going, but there was no water for them to pump out.
Wow.
So,
Yeah.
so they needed a lot of advocacy.
Uh-huh.
So then I think after that, I think the Center for Water took over in helping them, because that was their issue.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but
And I
on
do
the
know that in
beginning,
California, sorry, go
no,
ahead.
I was saying no, but in the beginning, I was there, supporting and helping them.
Yeah. I do know in California that uh in our California Constitution, I think water is supposed to be a human right. Like I think we've written that in our Constitution. So it's amazing to me that there's places where big ag can just suck up all the water and it just
Well,
become and then
do
sorry.
you know that you knew that Wonderful had stole our water rights?
I didn't know that. No,
Look
what?
it up, Water and Power, or look up Wonderful and Water Rights. Yeah, what happened is over there in Lost Hills, that's why that you got to be careful who's on boards of what groups because they start putting people that they want. That'll be yes people, right? And oh, they got money right away. They bend back, they're like, licking their boots. So then
Yeah.
before you know it, the group was having meetings at the Wonderful's facility there in Lost Hills. And so
Mhm.
somehow or another, they maneuvered it to where I think it's in 2040 something that we get the water rights back. Look it up. They stole our California water rights. And then, so
That's
then there was
wow.
people, it was in the news where some of the ranchers had it and they were like siphoning it to other ranchers, like I guess at a cheaper rate or whatever. Well, there we are and our water rates are going up and up.
Yeah, that's It's just
Yeah, look that up.
unbelievable.
Look that up. And I think
No, I
there's
need
one
to.
called Water and Power. But if you look, just Google "wonderful" and the water rights, and you'll see
Hmm.
it. Yeah,
Wow.
I don't know how I just somehow end up in the middle of where something's going on.
No, but that's a really incredible, I mean, thing to have that you're always involved in all these,
Yeah.
campaigns and stuff.
Yeah. So
But
this March, the March that we went on in 2022 from Delano to Sacramento, that was my third March. Because the first one
wow.
was when I was 7 years old with my mom. And that I sent you one of those pictures. You'll see the bus, it's a black and white. And then if you
Hmm.
see a little boy that's kind of standing kind of off towards the middle and like that, that's Emilio Huerta.
Oh wow. Wait, that's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah. So I sent you quite a few different pictures, and you'll see the picture of my aunt and uncle. That's when they were in Canada on the Great Boycott.
Mhm.
And she's holding her baby. So
That's
yeah.
amazing.
So my roots are deep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's incredible. I guess talking about these campaigns, I guess I'm also curious because I know when you joined the Delano Guardians, was it kind of in its early stages, or what did it look like when you first joined? And how did you go about forming the RCD? Just to go back to the clinic
Okay.
and
Well,
basic.
it was in the early stages, and then the person who had been the president had been out because she was sick. So it was
Hmm.
kind of like, you know, um, so then, but then that was the year. It had just I think it had started the year before, and
Hmm.
then but it was an election year, and that's when we were like said we were going to be making changes. We said we were determined, so we actually had started a group called let me think of the name of it right now. Uh, for Kern. We were starting a different group so that it was we were working, like mostly on civic engagement only. But then we decided because the Delano Guardians is most of us were from Delano that were in this group. So we
Right.
decided to just to go ahead and join the Delano Guardians and work out of there so that we can um, do civic engagement, get people
Hmm.
registered, get them to vote, and like that. And so trying to think, there was other things, yeah. And then because of water and because of the plume, and so those are all things that mattered to us, right? And recently we got involved with the rent control because
Hmm.
rent is outrageous. Like I can't even
Right.
afford. I live in Bakersfield. I have a 3 bedroom, 2 bathroom condo, and I can
Hmm.
afford that comfortably. And I can't even afford like a shack over there in Delano because the rents are so high.
Hmm.
And that's hard. You imagine farm workers. That's why, there has to be so many families in a home or they're renting the garage so we got involved in the rent control, the Delano Guardians, since we can, that's nonpartisan and we can do that's important. So
Hmm.
there was many issues that through the Guardians that we could work on. And
Hmm.
yeah, so that's how, and how we end up forming the RCD was when we were working with the state. So, but we
Hmm.
needed to be able to have a community group, and then the city had to be involved, and the state in order to form that. Um, in order to form that, there had to be community group that was involved and engaged. And
Hmm.
so that, but like after 10 years of chingy chingy, of, being there, catching their ear and showing
Right.
up to meetings and everything, and then when we finally got the changes in the council with people
Hmm.
who were in agreement with it, like even there was a lot of murders happening, gang murders. So we, the Guardians, we started getting involved in Hope and Heal. And we went through a whole session. I was also with the city appointed to a board to help reduce the violence. And so they ended up they got a grant. I think it was 1 million. They got a grant to hire somebody to work with families because there was a lot of victims of violent. What do they call it? Victims of violent crimes. And one of my cousin's granddaughter, she was 11, and another little girl was 12. They got murdered. They were outside on a water slide. It was a birthday party, and there was a drive-by. So here they were innocent. And then one of my other friends, her son, they were at a place where one of their friends had had an accident and died. And so somebody came by and did a drive-by and shot my friend's son, died. And so I just knew a lot of the people. So right away, what I did is I called the chief of police and called a meeting, and I called all, those friends that were affected, the mothers, and said, we need to have a meeting with the chief of police, and I'll put this meeting together, and then I'll facilitate it, and you guys can share about what your concerns are and your issues. So that's how we ended up doing the Hope and Heal, and then they ended up getting the city ended up getting the grant. And
Mhm.
like I said, if there's a need, that is my community. Wherever there's a need, that's my community. So when we were doing, when we first got together, like I said, if I wish I could remember the name, with the cancer, I kind of get brain fog, but it's coming back now. But we would do working in Wasco, McFarland, Wasco, and Shafter, and then
Mhm.
sometimes we do Arvin and Lamont. Some of the smaller communities.
Mhm.
So yeah, so that's how that worked out.
That's awesome. Um, I guess now I'd like to move into your work on the board of Omni Family Health. How did you get involved in that? What was it like getting onto the board? And tell us how that ties into kind of, I guess, your mission of working for the healthcare, uh, for healthcare's importance for farm workers and all that kind of thing. Uh,
Okay. Well, like I said, most of my family was involved in the union in the early days, and so they would
right.
volunteer sometimes at the clinic. And so my aunt was on the board before I was, and she got sick, and she was going to be getting off the board, but she told me about it, and I had just come back, from working in all these other places and unions and so forth, because I was working at the Central Labor Council, and so in Bakersfield now. So I was back local, and she said, Mija, I'm going to retire because I'm sick, and we need good people on the board because at that time there was they had just made some changes that were very necessary from mismanagement of the former person. And so, anyways, we got a great person, but there were some people on the board that, some people reject change, or they're used to, they like it, the status quo. And so she said, we need, Mija, they need you. We need strong people that can speak up and, make sure that our communities are going to be represented and stuff. So she said, I'm going to tell our CEO, Francisco, about you. And so I said, okay. So then, so I filled out the application, and then, he called me, and then, asked me about my interest on the board and stuff. And I told him about, how that's how we first started getting medical care, was through the clinic, through the union. And actually his and his wife's background was also the same, but like from Fresno and from another area out that way, they're farm worker families too. And so anyway, so he said, okay, well, we'll accept your application, and I'll set a meeting with you and the committee. That there's a committee that you meet with first, and then they can recommend you or not to the full board. So I did that. And then I went to the full board, and they, the committee had recommended my acceptance to the board. And so anyway, so I met with the full board, and then they voted me in. So that's how I got in. And then later on, I'm now the executive secretary of the board. So I sign, like when we're applying for grants, or that's one thing we stay on top of. If there's grants or things that we can apply for in order to be able to continue to provide services, especially like right now that there's so many challenges with the government, with the federal government, because we're a federally qualified health center. And
Mhm.
so, some people before, when things happened like shutdowns in DC, they had to shut the doors, but we didn't. We made changes, or like we shortened hours, or we made changes so that we can continue to keep our doors open to provide services for our community.
It's amazing. Um, Sorry, let me take a look at my questions again. Just to make sure I'm on
That's
track.
okay.
Um, I guess what are something I was curious about in my own research was um it's amazing that Omni Family Health is here in a community like Delano, especially with a lot of people who might be without insurance or doctors, or even some folks who might be undocumented who might have to go to these clinics. So I guess like what are some of the biggest challenges of providing healthcare to these communities who could be without insurance, who are, not used to having doctors, who might need to build that trust with the clinic again, or who might even be undocumented, who might fear going to an official clinic like that.
Well, we have outreach workers that are out in the community,
Hmm.
and that are introduce our community to Omni, welcome
Right,
them, and also when they come there, many times some people can qualify for services, but they're intimidated because some people don't even speak the language,
right.
read and write in their own language, even whether it's
Hmm.
English or Spanish. Sometimes they're not very literate, right? So it's
Hmm.
intimidating to apply. So we have what they call navigators, and they help them fill out all the documentation that they need in order to apply. And so that's how, yeah,
That's
that's one
awesome.
of the ways, yeah. That, and we were doing some other things too, like in the prenatal. They might still be doing it, where they might have like once a month, like a baby shower, and they would have gifts and stuff, and people would have raffle tickets, and so we just do things in the community, and they really support. They support things in the community as well.
Hmm.
You know,
Makes sense.
yeah.
Yeah. And what are
Because
some of the
word of mouth,
biggest?
word of mouth
Yeah,
goes far. You
it
can have
does.
brochures and you can send mailers, but word of mouth goes far. And also we do have TV commercials, and we have like when you get to the airport, they have I forget what they call that, where we have billboards and teleprompters, I guess there's something like that, where they'll have a thing about Omni Health, just so you can start to hear and see. And they have, people that look just like us, and
Hmm.
varied people. So you see, like, oh, okay, it looks like a friendly place to go.
Hmm. Makes sense. Yeah. And I guess like what are some of the biggest problems that you'll find in these communities? Whether it's like environmental, is it health negligence, is it nutrition, in your experience at least?
I think a lot of it is environmental and nutrition,
Hmm.
because food costs, and it's cheaper to buy. It's less expensive to buy cheap food that doesn't have
Hmm.
value, whole value. I have a
Right.
daughter. She cooks only, like, I'm at her house now. That's, or else I would have my pictures, my activist pictures behind me too. But she only buys and cooks. How do they call that? Where they don't have any pesticides. I
Mm,
Se me fue. Uh,
I'm not sure. You mean like organic food or
Yes, yes, yes,
yeah.
yes, yes. She only feeds her children organic foods, and like she'll make them the ones that do jujitsu and wrestling, right? And they're young. They're only 6 and 5 and 6. The little girl just turned 5, but they
Hmm.
do amazing things, these kids, and I'm so shocked, But she only feeds them healthy food, and they know if you offer them candy, they'll say, "Oh no, that has red dye 40." Like she's educated, constantly educating them on food and why, and they eat organically. And so, like a person who can barely put food on the table, you're not going to buy the highest quality. You're going to buy
Oh yeah.
what's cheap. Like they're going to buy the Tampico or the other juices that don't really have the juice value.
Hmm.
It's something else, right? Whatever it is.
Right. No,
Yeah.
that makes sense. And you also mentioned environmental problems being one of the biggest problems. I imagine that's like spraying of
Oh
pesticides
yeah,
and
because a lot of times people don't even don't realize,
hmm.
don't even realize about, like, for instance, right now, by in between Delano and McFarland, they want to open up Cavanta. It's a place where they're going to put stuff in the ground. But if
Hmm.
there's like a little earthquake or shake, what if it is released? It's toxic,
Right.
right? And a lot of times, though, because people are unaware, they don't go to these meetings, they don't find out. And so the corporations can just go in there and do whatever they want, and people are getting sick and they don't know why. As it
Hmm.
is, we already have, um, we have, like, just like in a lot of other places, we have a high percentages of people with asthma and things like that because of the pesticides and because of the oil fields, and that's why we worked really hard to get that bill passed for where the oil fields couldn't drill close to homes, schools, churches, or hospitals. I forgot how much what the area was now. Like I said, when you're in a campaign, you're all inundated, and the next one comes, and it's like, oh, you, yeah.
Like
So,
rapid fire.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So, yeah, it was very important because they were allowed to just drill everywhere,
Hmm.
and when there's, especially when children are young, it causes brain diseases and issues with their with their health, like elders with Parkinson's and Alzheimer's and things like that.
Hmm.
You know, so you need to make sure that at least it's a safe distance from where families live,
Hmm.
especially people that are susceptible and sensitive to those chemicals.
Yeah. And what do you see as being a solution to that kind of lack of knowledge that a lot of people have about these issues?
That's why we have community meetings. And
Right.
like when there's things going on in town, like a parade or something, we flyer, we have our flyers and we have conversations with people, or,
Hmm.
we like sometimes go to city senior citizens and give them information because they're one of the um, groups of people that are very vulnerable, so
Yeah.
we invite them to the meetings, but we let them know why, and why, what this meeting's about and why it's important for them to come.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Especially, or we tell them like for their grandchildren, if not for them, right? Because
Mhm.
everybody cares about their grandchildren. Sometimes
Yeah.
they say, ah, yo, ya pa que, I'm already, but your grandchildren, So
Yeah.
it's really those one-on-one conversations. It's the relationships, how you educate people.
Yeah. And then this last question I have for you, it's kind of a repeat of the other one, but answer it in any way you'd like. I guess I'm curious what you think are some of the biggest health problems facing communities like Delano right now, in your opinion. And what are your, I guess, proposed solutions or actions that communities can take to combat these issues? I know you have a lot of experience in taking actions, so I think you have a lot to offer. Yeah. Sorry,
Um,
I could re-ask the question. I can rephrase it as well. Yeah, I guess I'm just curious what you think are the biggest health problems facing communities like Delano right now.
Health problems, I think it's environment, and I think it's food. I think it is because education is so important because people don't understand when their valves are, when they have heart problems because of the fat, or I cook,
Right.
we want carnitas, or we want you don't have to stop eating the things you like, but don't eat them often, like, or
Hmm.
find a healthier way of cooking, but
Hmm.
until you actually educate people on why and what happens to your arteries. I mean, you have to, it's kind of like a show and tell. Even like when you're
Hmm.
organizing workers, you kind of have to show them like where the power is and where the money is going and why isn't there any for them, in order for them to realize how they're being left out, right? So you have to help
Yeah.
people come to that solution and understanding about if they really want to live in a health and they want to live a life where they can thrive and still be able to walk, and
Hmm.
stuff like that. Because if not, it really will affect their health.
Hmm.
So
That makes
I think
sense.
it's very important to make sure that in our organizations that we're doing that work, because I think that communities, they trust, it has to be an organization that they trust,
Right.
people that they know, that come from their community, and that they know have investment there, live there, are part of it.
Hmm.
So
That
yeah.
makes sense. Um, well, I guess to wrap up, I'm curious if there's anything you want to add about your own history in politics, your own history in healthcare.
Well,
Anything you want to share?
Well, I think, as a solution too, I think that I don't know where, how, and what aspect, but I would really, I see a vision or something. I would love to work with youth, younger people, to inspire them to help them understand what organizing is about. And like, it's not one issue. It's not, even when you're labor organizing, it's not one issue. Like Caesar realized, I used to work at a grocery store as a teenager, and I would see a mother come in with a baby that just had little, like, fin right here, just a little bit of a, not even an arm, just a little thing, and on the legs. And sometimes baby, it was summer, wouldn't have a t-shirt on, just a diaper. And that was from the pesticides, right? Mothers working in the fields of the pesticides when they're pregnant. And so they were called the cancer clusters in McFarland. And
Right.
so, I think that we really need more younger people to be inspired to do this work. I mean, like I said,
Hmm.
I'm 66 and I mean, I'm still inspired and I'm still on fire because I have a mission. Like I've never felt like it's a job. I felt like it's, it's more important than that. You know, it's a way of life. It's a way of living. Even in any conversation, I'm always empowering somebody or educating them on something, right? Just because conversations, it's an exchange of information and building trust. And so I think it's so important for young people to understand that, and to understand like how these issues, how just a conversation about whether someone's complaining about their water bill or they're complaining, that how we have to help them understand where the power is, or how we make changes, or how we invite them to a meeting. They don't have to be speak professionally or have gone to a university. I always tell people I got my political science degree from the University of the UFW, where my mother was my first teacher, and Dolores and Caesar and Gilbert Badia were my first, professors, right? Because we learned by doing, we learned by living. And we saw those changes take place. We saw Latinos become elected. One of my cousins retired from being an ALJ. He was a lawyer, and then he was appointed under Brown as a judge, administrative law judge. His daughter now is a doctor in Clinica, over in the Bay Area in Oakland.
Hmm.
Clínica de la Raza, Dr.
Hmm.
Chrissy Chavez Johnson. I mean, those are the people that Robert F. Kennedy said, one day when your children take their rightful place in history, becoming doctors, lawyers, and teachers, no one will be prouder than you. You will say, I did this. I marched with Cesar Chavez. And so, when I see like you and I see other young people, becoming professionals or doing their work, I feel proud because back in the day, we were just expected to work in the fields alongside our parents and continue that. And like in a small town like ours, the power was very controlled. And so if you saw a Latino, someone that looked like us, it was very rare in some of this, even in a store, right? Like at Penny's or whatever. And
Hmm.
sometimes they'd have one or two because they needed bilingual people. But
Right.
otherwise, the good jobs were not, were not open to us per se,
Hmm.
as now we have, and I mean, you see how intelligent, people are. There are people, it's not for lack of intelligence that we were working in the fields. It was for lack of opportunities,
Right.
right?
Makes
So,
sense.
I think that really, having inspiring younger people, and also that we have to continue to educate the parents about how important education is so that they can support their kids too. Because,
Hmm.
we don't need any, like I said, we were having such a big problem with gangs, and usually it's
Hmm.
generational, and it
Hmm.
is poverty. Like
Hmm.
my kids, like I see that my kids, how they take the kids to um, tournaments and stuff. It costs money. And when my kids were in school, they were in band, or my daughter played sports. I mean, a bat can cost, so much, and the knee pads and the shoulder pads, being involved and engaged in things costs money. I remember I would ask my mom sometimes for things, and she was saying, oh, eso es para gente que tiene dinero, and I would be lucky that sometimes my grandmother would say, déjala, yo le pago, you know, because she knew it was important. But, or yo le hago los vestidos, like to be in dancing or things like that. So it's very important, that we encourage and support the parents to support their youth, and also to help them to understand about how feeding them better, you know. Like my grandma would say, to nopales are one of the healthiest foods you can eat, and frijoles,
Hmm.
Dice, comida de pobre, pero es saludable, right? It's poor
Yeah.
people's food, but it's healthy. It's not full of preservatives,
Right.
or dyes or things like that. So we have to
Hmm.
get people to understand what the value of food is too. All
Hmm.
our kids like those hot Cheetos or those Takis, and all full of salt. Imagine all that salt,
Yeah.
and the red dye and all that stuff. So I think organizing is, education, and it's very important.
That makes sense. Yeah. What's your read on I know an organization I've gotten involved in with that kind of helps organize the youth is Lab for Tomorrow. Have you gotten involved with them in any way? Actually, that's how I got your contact information through Lab for Tomorrow.
Uh-huh. Well, not I haven't really, because they were doing like they were doing their own, thing while we were doing the civic engagement, but then they
Right,
moved their office. So I really haven't, but they did, I think we did participate with them with the rent control.
right.
So, yeah.
There's a rent control campaign.
But I
Yeah.
think sometimes yet young people might think that because we're older, like we're, like kind of like dinosaurs or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's like not a space for them. Like it's not like a youth space. But I think Love for Tomorrow is definitely transforming into incorporating more high schoolers and things like that. So
Yeah.
hopefully we see more of the youth involved.
And that's great because, like I said, I was young when I learned from some, I could name so many of the elders that were the leaders, but I knew that I could learn from them. I used to always
Right.
be at the 40 acres volunteering. My uncle had an work there. And so they'd have me doing the ditto machine or answering the phone, United
Mm,
Farm Workers or, things like that. But you're learning by being in these environments. I always tell people, young people, volunteer, 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 because you're
mm,
going to learn by the people that you're around, and if that's something that you're interested in, you're going to learn like the issues, the language, vocabulary, whatever it is that you need, because um, like when I was used to organizing farm workers and when I went into working into the hotel industry, like you really need to listen. I learned, I tell them, you guys are the professionals. I listen to the workers because their issues were different. They might be different on the job, their issues, but their issues were all the same: a voice on the job, safety, fair wages, and health care. They all cared about the same things, dignity in their work and having a bargaining agreement, not just empty promises or where they never get a raise, they're just, or they just give to the people they want to. They have seniority, they have a voice on what goes into their contract, into their bargaining agreement, right? But really to learn the issues from whichever different industry I was organizing, you really need to listen to the workers. And so I would say like I would be happy to work more with Loud for Tomorrow because we can learn from each other. We can always learn from each other,
hmm.
right?
Yeah, amazing. Is there any
And
other? Oh, sorry.
no, and I was saying, and that's how, like the circle, right? It's that it's a circle. Some of us, like we just lost our former mayor of Madera, Santos Garcia, passed away this weekend. And I mean, he was a great activist and a knowledgeable person and a wonderful person. But so we need who's going to be the next Santos Garcia, right?
Right.
We need to continue, keep growing leaders and keep empowering others, whether
Hmm.
they're just activists, but by educating them, right? Educating, building the relationships, educating, and then agitating and activating them, mobilizing, you know, even just coming to a meeting to just agree and say, yes, we want that, or no, we don't want that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Staff community engagement. Yeah,
Yes,
definitely.
Caesar always had workers, I mean, speaking up. Some of them didn't even speak English, but somebody in the crowd would say, oh, I'll volunteer to translate. And, in some of these city council meetings, they have translators. But so it doesn't matter, you have what you have to say is very important. And the more that we let people know that what you have to say is very important, and listening to their story, because when I listen to their story, that's when I see where their strengths were, and I'm able to tell them, look at all these things you've done to get here. So what is there to be afraid of? And they fire you from this job, they fire you from that job, you go find another job. But if we all stand together, that's where we're going to make the difference and make change. They can't fire everybody, like.
Right.
So it's just understanding and empowering. I think empowering is the critical key.
Yeah,
Yeah, in
makes sense.
education.
Yeah.
So, anyways,
Well, if there's anything else you'd like to add, feel free, but that's pretty much all the questions I have for you today.
okay. I guess,
But well,
you know,
yeah.
I guess growing up in it and being a part of it is like what made me who I am, and actually realizing that unless we do take action, we're never going to be heard. And
Mm,
and we need to speak up for our communities or for our families or whatever, for our schools, for the children. So, in order to get a quality education or to get quality health care, but it's at affordable prices. So, anyways, yeah, that's, that's my mission. And, I feel it gives me life, gives me life.
hmm.
Okay. I just wanted to say that being a part of activism at a very young age just gave me the si se puede attitude. And I say it's in my DNA,
Hmm.
because we learn si se puede and todo se puede, and
Hmm.
so I think it's very important so that we also continue that and that we spread it and share it so that others can be empowered.